No longer will I carry my mom's pain, part 2. The next memory is after my mom and my dad split up. So my mom finally left my dad and moved back home with her mom. Which, let's be honest, was not necessarily a good thing, because my grandmother had most of her adult children living with her and their children in a tiny 2-bedroom rundown house. It was a very, very bad situation. My mom said that she would look down on the bathroom floor and you could see a random cat looking back at you from underneath the house. And mind you, they didn't own any cats. Maybe that's one of the reasons she was so afraid of cats, I guess. Fortunately, when I was 6 months old, my mom met someone that I considered my father. When I tell you, in my opinion, he was the best thing that could have ever happened to my mom and us. His name was Wade David Brooks. I believe he was in his late 20s at this time. He had no children, and at the hands of his mother, he had experienced a lot of abuse and neglect as a child. But if I could ever look back in my past and remember anyone showing me what a man, a father, a husband, a provider was, that man was Wade David Brooks. Wade could not read, nor could he write, but he could definitely count his money and knew how to take care of his family. In my eyes, he was truly a man's man. I was told that there were some nights that my mom and Wade also fought, but to be perfectly honest, I don't have any memories of that. And they were together from when I was 6 months old until I was 8. I don't have any memories of them fighting. I remember all of the good times with Wade. We did everything together as a family, and even if my mom tried, Wade would not allow her to exclude us out of anything. If they cooked steak, lobster, shrimp, and catfish, then all of those things would be available to us children also. I've even seen Wade run down a flight of stairs as fast as he could because he looked out the window and saw some older boys trying to fight on my older brother. It was always Wade to the rescue. Kind of like our own personal superhero, in a sense. But unfortunately, one night, just a few weeks after my 8th birthday, Wade wanted to go out to a club in Southtown, Oklahoma City. My mom wanted to stay home because they had bought a lot of seafood, and she just wanted to stay home and cook. But Wade wanted to go out. He told my mom, and I quote, "I was born in Southtown, and I'm gonna die in Southtown." Those words would ring true just a few hours later. Back in the day when my family would go out to party, they would all go out together. A lot of my mom's sisters and brothers would get together and go out as one. So this night, they went out to a little hole in the wall. I believe it was Ernest Butler's joint. And they went there frequently to shoot pool, dance, drink, just have a good old self time with friends and family. But there was somebody there that night that wasn't in the mood. And he decided, I don't think I want to be bothered with y'all tonight. Now, mind you, my mom was kind of like rowdy. She was the baby of the bunch, but she was bossy and kind of controlling and, big mouth and always, didn't mind fighting if she had to type situation. She decided to go to the bar to get her a drink. She reached over to get her drink, and because he was already on a mission, this man sitting at the bar had a very negative response to my mom reaching over him. And that, my friend, is the moment that all hell broke loose. This man immediately pulled his .357 Magnum out and said, "Bitch, I'll blow your brains out." The whole bar started to scatter. Everybody starts running and screaming. My mom's sister, my Aunt Teresa, the same sister who went to Wichita with my Aunt Kay when they were younger girls, grabbed my mom's head while this man had the gun still up to her head and begged that man to please not kill my baby sister. She held my mom's head to her bosom while he was still holding the gun up to her head. His words were, and I quote, "I'm going to kill me a Shelton tonight." My stepdad was in the back of the bar shooting pool when he heard the commotion. He went and looked out and saw what was going on. He ran out the back door to the front of the bar to his car to get his shotgun. Now, a side note, Wade usually kept a pistol in his pocket, but just a few years before this nightmare, he and my mom was out, I believe, at the same bar, the same club, dancing, and his pistol fell out of his pocket. When it fell out, the gun went off, the bullet went into my mom's neck, came out somewhere, went into her arm, came out. The bullet was lodged in my mom's stomach until the day she died. So for that reason, Wade did not have a pistol on him. He had his shotgun in the car. This man with the gun walks my mom out the front door while my aunt, mind you, is still holding her head, begging him, "Please do not kill my baby sister." When he gets outside the front door, Wade is standing there cocked and loaded. First, Wade sees my mom because he's behind my mom and holding my mom. Then Wade sees him. He aimed at him. As soon as Wade sees him, he fires. Pow! Shot the gun. Shotgun goes off. There was a lady standing there next to Wade, whose name was Baby. And what did Baby do? Baby actually pushed Wade right as he was firing his shotgun. And instead of the bullet hitting the man, it grazed the man's shirt, snatched his shirt off, and went into the door and hit the door. Wade fell from the push, which gave the man the upper hand that he needed. This man pushed my mom out of the way and stood over my stepdad and literally emptied his gun into him while my mom and everyone else sat there and watched. He shot him in his brain, his heart, his groin, as well as a few other places. My mom said when the ambulance came and lifted my stepdad off the ground, she knew he was gone because she saw his brains laying on the ground. But she still held out some hope. Of course, he didn't make it. And they said if he had lived any longer, he would have been a vegetable. And of course, my mom didn't want him to suffer. That was the night that life changed for me forever. The only man that I ever knew as a protector, as a provider, and that loved me unconditionally was gone. My mom went through an understandably hard time, as she did when she had the issue with my Aunt Kay and my getting her eye put out. She blamed herself, of course. My mom dealt with depression and anxiety, and I'm sure a host of a lot of other emotions and mental traumas that I can't even describe right now. That was the beginning of my mom's drug addiction. She was already, in my opinion, an alcoholic, but I believe she used alcohol to cope with the things that she dealt with in her previous years as a child and coming up with the relationship with my dad. But after this experience, she actually began a 20-year addiction to crack cocaine. One day, me and my brother was at home and the phone rang. And it was a man asking to speak to my mom. She wasn't there, so we let him know. She's not here. Can we take a message? This man said, tell her David called. Say what now? Because mind you, Wade David Brooks was my stepdad, and he just died a couple months ago. So we were confused. Now come to find out, it was a new man that my mom hadn't met. And oh boy, was he a monster. Now, I'm not going to be unfair and say that everything that happened between him and my mom was all him. That would be a lie. I remember many times my mom would pop him upside his head after they were good and drunk and run in her bedroom and lock the door, and he would chase her and try to get to her. I remember this one specific time they had been up drinking like normal. My mom popped him upside the head and ran to her room, locked the door. He's beating on her door, trying to break her door down. I couldn't have been no more than about 10 years old at this point. I'm standing in between him and my mom's door, bedroom door, on the outside, and my mom is on the inside with the door locked. And he's beating on the door trying to get in, but I'm standing in between to block him as if I could. I then send my brother downstairs to get my Uncle Steve because he lived right downstairs from us at the time. So although my brother was 2 years older than me, he was more scared of David than I was. For some reason, I didn't care. I did whatever I had to do in order to stand in between this lunatic to try to protect my mom. It was that simple. My Uncle Steve came up that day and saved the day, of course. There was another time I remember that happened one night. David came home and my mom wouldn't let him in, so he kicked our door in. And because we lived in the projects in an apartment, we didn't have anybody to fix it. It was the weekend. So we pushed the couch in front of the door to keep it closed until maintenance came on Monday. I was probably about 9 or 10 years old at this time. So my mom told me, okay, let's go. We're getting ready to leave, me and you. But when we get up to go out, David stands up and say, y'all not going nowhere. And he stands in front of the couch that is blocking or keeping the door closed. He had to be around 6 feet or so. My mom was about 5'2", 5'3", and I was only about 9 or 10. So what were we going to do again? What was we going to do? She tried to convince him to let us leave, but he wasn't budging. I took my little bitty fist and I balled it up and I swung as hard as I could to hit this man in his jaw. I knocked him on the couch. I then pushed him and the couch out of the way, and I told my mama, let's go. And we went. Now, I don't say that because I feel like I have so much power and he wouldn't do anything to me and I could, because I was so powerful and strong. That's not what it was. I believe that even though it didn't always seem like it, God always had his hedge of protection around me. That's my belief. A funny side note, David told us that he used to be laying up watching TV when he was in the house by himself, laying in my mama's bed. He said that Wade would come in and throw clothes and stuff all out the closet and literally destroy my mom's room. He said that he would be driving in our car. Now, this is a car that Wade has never been in. My mom bought the car with the insurance money that Wade left us. And so David was driving the car. He said that he would be driving this car. He would look in the rearview mirror and Wade would be sitting in the back seat, mean mugging him. Now, to be honest, do I believe this stuff happened? Probably not. But I do know one thing. Wade told us that in one of his past lives, he was a dog. And when he died, this little puppy came all the way upstairs to our apartment door and just laid and slept there for days. Now, mind you, we don't do animals. We don't like animals. We didn't have animals. We didn't scare it off because in our hearts, we felt like that was him. So, did he do all that to David? I don't know. Probably not. But I do know there was a spiritual side of Wade. Absolutely. Another time my mom and David got into a fight, and my mom and David got into a fight. He had my mom by the throat under the stairs. Of course, I was under there trying to pry he had 3 fingers on one hand. And he had those 3 fingers wrapped around my mom's throat. And he was choking her life out of her. The strongest 3 fingers I've ever seen in my life. Again, we were under the stairs, which means we were downstairs, and my Uncle Steve lived right downstairs, and we were right in front of my Uncle Steve's apartment door. So he heard the commotion. He came out with the knife and sticks David in the head. Blood gushes everywhere. Do you hear me? The crazy thing is, instead of my mom joining in with my uncle to try to get this dude, because he was just trying to choke her life out of her, my mom runs in the house and gets a bucket of ice water to try to stop the bleeding from David's head. She's trying to save him. Of course, the police was called. David said he didn't know. He told the police he didn't know who did it. Nobody got in trouble. Everything stayed the same. Mama stayed with the dude, unfortunately. Can I be honest, as a side note, mamas, we have to do better for our babies. Why would she stay with this man? This kind of stuff went on all the time. Not to this degree, but something of the sort went on all of the time. What's crazy is, that was actually the only time that I ever remember the police coming out. No one ever called and said, please go check on those children or nothing. And this is the reason that I'm a firm believer in, if you see something, say something. But it was a mess, and people wondered why I was so angry, why I always had a frown on my face, and why I always looked like I was mad about something. Well, I was. Wouldn't you be? I was just a freaking baby. I didn't know what was going on. I was in a constant state of survival mode. Literally, I was just trying to survive and keep me and my mom and my brother safe and alive. That's it. One of the craziest things about all of this, though, is I had a dad who at this time lived in Colorado Springs in a nice big 4-story home by himself until my oldest brother moved up there with him. My dad made good money, could have supported me, could have taken care of me, could have rescued me, but he did not. I begged him a few times to move back to Oklahoma City, and he said that he wasn't moving back to Oklahoma City until after I turned 18 years old because of child support. Now, mind you, this is funny and it pisses me off at the same time. Child support was only $150 a month at that time. But that's how much I feel that I was worth to my dad. Less than $150 a month. Side note, parents, we literally have to start loving our children more than we hate the other parent, because they're not the only one being affected by your absence, by you not being there. It's not the other parent that you're hurting, it's your children. You in return become a neglectful parent to your children, all because you don't want to do anything for or whatever with the other parent. Crazy. We got to stop that. Love your children more than you hate the other parent? Can we do that? You actually don't even know. You could be allowing your children to be played with by some of the most evils in this world. Why do you think we have so many cases of step parents? And we do have parents too, but step parents killing the step kids or the girlfriend's kids, or the baby, the new girlfriend killing the boyfriend's kids, or the new husband's children. And we got to do better. We have to be better for our children. My dad told me that he was actually surprised I made it out of all of that and still had my right mind. Really? Did you actually believe that I made it out of all of that and I'm still in my right mind? How do you think that's possible? Which lets me know you were aware of what was going on all that time, but you chose to do nothing. Which is some of the reason to this day that I have to forgive my dad and heal from that. Even though up until a few years ago, the last time we talked a few years ago, he kind of stood 10 toes down on the decisions that he made concerning leaving me, and in that fucked up situation. He kind of stood 10 toes down, like explaining why, as if there was a reason. $150 a month is what he was avoiding. Although it wasn't me being physically abused, it was as if it was. It was so draining. It was awful to be that fearful. I was fearful most of my childhood, most of my adult life. I was fearful of everything. Going over railroad tracks, sometimes even leaving the house, feeling like, oh, I'm probably not going to make it back. Just crazy stuff. So I learned at an early age that I have to protect me. I have to do for me. I have to protect me because no one else did, and no one else probably ever would. I can't believe how many emotions I'm actually going through when I was writing this. I cried most of the time writing this story. Although I'm no longer angry at my dad, I do sometimes still get pissed off and emotional when I bring up the stuff to this degree. But back on David. We actually found out about my brother not being my dad's biological child because David threatened my mom that on my brother's 13th birthday, if she didn't tell my brother, then he would. So of course my mom didn't have a choice. She had to tell us that my brother was not my dad's biological son. And that was a tough pill to swallow, but when we met my brother's dad, oh my God, everything made sense. My brother acts like him, looks like him, laughs like him, smiles like him. It was crazy. My brother's children are just like his dad. But at the same time, as children, that wasn't a reality that we wanted to know then. We had gone through so much up until that point. That was something we just didn't care about. We didn't want to know that. We didn't need to know that. My mom later actually dated my brother's biological dad for a few years. And I'm going to be honest, it wasn't half bad. He wasn't abusive. And he was naturally a fun-loving, kind-hearted guy. I think he just loved the women a little bit too much for her. They said at one point in his life, he might have been a pimp back in the day or whatever. But let me tell you something. I would take a fun-loving pimp over a psychotic killer any day. How about you? So let's talk about how this part of the nightmare ended. One day I was about 11 or 12 years old, which means my brother Pooh would have been about 13 or 14. David came home and my brother was flicking the remote through the remote control, the channels, trying to find something to watch. And for some reason that irritated David. Now mind you, David or anyone else for that matter ever had permission to correct us. He's never yelled at us. He's never hit us. He's nothing like that. That's one thing I can say about my mom. She didn't play that. None of her men was ever out of line with me or my brother. So David took the remote control from my brother and took the batteries out. When my mom came home, she saw that the batteries were out of the remote control and asked my brother what happened. My brother told her, and she lost it. Don't ask me why, but she lost it. She kicked David out immediately, told him, you don't have a right to touch this remote control. If my son want to flick the remote control, that's his business. She told him their dad left them the money to buy this TV with the insurance money. And if they want to flick the remote control all they want to, that's their business. You don't mess with my children and their TV. She put him out immediately. Sounds like she exaggerated the whole situation, don't it? She exaggerated, right? Well, David left and got a ride to my mom's friend's house, like he had done a few times before. Just so happens my mom was actually at that friend's house the day before all of this went down. They was drinking, having a good old self time like they've done many times before. This this family friend, he was kind of like an uncle to me. I kind of believe that David might have been a little bit pissed off or jealous about that, because in a playful way, when my mom, when they would start drinking, this friend would actually flirt and hit on my mom. But again, playfully. So, David catches a ride to this friend's house for the night. This family friend let him in, gave him a place to stay for the night. And that would be the worst decision of that man's life. The men were drinking, and they ended up getting into an argument, and they began to fight. To spare the details of the story because of the family of the victim, I'll just say this. David committed manslaughter for the second time. Oh yeah, I said the second time. I found out. He committed manslaughter. He then took a shower in that man's house afterwards and put on that man's clothes and drove that man's car back to my mama's house and got in the bed with my mama and laid down. And of course, my mom let him back in without a problem. She didn't have a clue what was going on. A few days after her friend was killed, my mom and David was home laying in the bed, and they got a knock at the door. It was actually detectives. Because my mom had been with her friend the night before he was killed, they wanted to speak with him and see if she had any information or knew anything that could further the investigation. So they asked her to come down to the station with them, and of course she was glad to go. They then asked her, is there anybody else in the house with you? My mom said, yeah, my boyfriend David. The detectives yelled back through the apartment, hey Dave, you mind coming down to the station to give us a statement? Now, I'm not sure if they knew that David was the killer or not, but had they not gone that extra mile and asked if somebody else was in the house and asked him to come down, life would have probably turned out a little bit different for me and my family. Long story short, David confessed to manslaughter, and he confessed to killing him and got manslaughter and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. That's when I found out that he had also committed manslaughter in the past before he met my mom, where he had also did 20 years. Now, why my mom would make a decision to be with and stay with someone after learning something that big absolutely blows my mind. Parents, we have to do better for our babies. Even if we don't care enough about ourselves, we have to do better for our babies. Do you understand? However, because I know my mom's story, I know her history, I do understand some of her poor decision making. Not to excuse it, but I do understand it. When this man went to prison, he would find out our address, like who my mom was dating, our phone numbers, everything. He threatened to kill us so many times. A short time after he was arrested, my mom asked me to help her clean out the closet, because she not only had clothes from him, but she also still had clothes in there from Wade from years before. And she wanted to get rid of all of it. So I'm helping my mom clean out her closet. And what do we find in the closet? A loaded gun. How long that gun was in there, I have no idea. But what I do know is he said that he planned to kill all of us. He actually wrote in his letter that he sent my mom from prison that he really wanted to actually cut her up into little pieces and have her children come home and find her dead. My mom sent those letters back to the warden. Come to find out, he actually worked for the warden at the time, so she never heard anything back, never got any type of explanation, nothing. Nothing was resolved with that case. We just had to actually live in the fear of not knowing when or if this man was ever going to come for us again. Now, I say a funny side note. I don't know how do I transition like that, but a funny side note. When I was pregnant with my son, I got an apartment over in the hood. I believe it was like 27th Street off Martin Luther King. And my mom moved in with me. One day she had walked up to the store on 23rd, up to the grocery store. And on her way back, she swore for God she saw David digging in the trash can. When I tell you, my mom ran as fast and as hard as she could. I had never seen my mama that winded. She was huffing and puffing. She said, girl, I know that was him. That was him in that trash can. We thought he had found us. Do you hear me? But one of my prayers right now is, Lord, I hope that David is dead. That's my prayer. That's my prayer right now. That this man is dead and I no longer have to be in fear of ever running into him again. No longer will I carry my mom's pain. Part 2. Thank you so much for listening. Come back for part 3. Have a good one.